Hi everybody, I'm going to do a video on PubBattles Antietam 1862. I've got a couple of the PubBattles games, Antietam, Marengo, and actually I have got the starter battle, which was Monmouth from the American War of Independence as well. But today I thought I would give you an overview of Antietam, and importantly, as well as showing you a few of the main mechanics of PubBattles and how it works, I also wanted to focus on the components, which are, as you can see, fabulous. Talk a little bit about PubBattles itself, and show you just some of the examples of play using the Antietam map. I'm not going to do a full playthrough of a battle on this occasion. It may be something I'll do at a later date, depending on what people want. But I just wanted to show you, this is a sample layout, for example, of some of the troops involved. Hopefully you can see those okay. Let's just zoom those in. But importantly, I'm hoping you can also see this fantastic canvas map, which is the trademark of Command Post Games PubBattles system. You can have a paper version of this, but for me the canvas option was a no-brainer. When you're looking at this kind of detail, reminds me very much, if I move this here so you can see the famous sunken road, and some of the bridges on the river here. Reminds me very much of Kriegspiel, which I have played many times over the years, and a big fan of the Kriegspiel system. Obviously Kriegspiel was the Prussian system used to teach their officers using a war game with blocks and maps, and these maps are definitely of the same quality as you would have expected to have seen army officers playing their Kriegspiel games over. Kriegspiel is still available through Two Fat Lardies. The game was originally converted into the English version by Bill Leeson, and you can still get that through the Two Fat Lardies. I have one of the original books Bill Leeson did of this. I used to actually, a couple of times, went to his house along with a number of other people and played Kriegspiel games, which were absolutely fantastic. So it's a system I think anyone involved in wargaming should find out more about. It's a fantastic system, and it offers a real depth that you don't get in other war games. And if you can master Kriegspiel, you can master anything, I would suggest. So we're going to talk a bit about the system, but just to give you an overview of some of the components, the blocks and the maps, and the quality of the maps as well. And you've also got a blind system where each command can keep reserves off table, out of view of the enemy, and they're kept behind these little folded examples here. So you would have your reserves hidden here from your opponent if you were the Union player, in this case Burnside. Again, a very, very nice mechanic, but we'll come on to mechanics in a little bit more detail shortly. So I just want to talk first of all about Command Post Games. American company. Marshall is the main gentleman that I speak to there. Fantastic guy, always available on email. Communication is excellent, and support for the system is superb, to the point that various upgrades etc. come out for the system. So in this case I'm using Antietam Scenario 2, but we now have a Scenario 3 which I have got on PDF, and I've just ordered some new bits from Marshall for Scenario 3, and that's all free, you know. So once you've got the base system, you can order any upgrades or additions for free other than the cost of postage. Okay, for me in the UK, American postage is naturally going to be a bit expensive, but because it's free there should be no duties or VAT etc. to worry about, all being well. So yeah, big thumbs up for Marshall at CP Games, Command Post Games. As I say, the support to the system is fantastic. Other things, as I say, we've already talked about the Kriegspiel link to this game. I think this game as well could easily be played with my favourite scales of figures, 2, 3, 6 mil particularly. The smaller scales, even using these maps, I think that's quite doable. I actually like the blocks. It reminds me of Kriegspiel, which, as I say, I used to play. I like that. So yeah, I think there's scope to expand this. Maybe you could use the main map as a campaign map, and design a system where you then fight miniature battles on the field using 6 or 10 mil figures, even American Civil War figures. So that's something I'm contemplating experimenting with going forward, is using a sort of an overview of the battle map. Maybe you know, if you had a lot of players, you could have your army commanders, in this case McClellan, Lee, in separate sort of areas, and then you can have your division or brigades, corps, run by players who are on the Wargames table. So this would be the overview map for the army commanders, and then you would have them playing a war game. So again, I think the system lends itself. This could be played using the same system's rules quite easily with figures. You can play using dice, very simply, or you can also use the PubBattles dice. And for me, the PubBattles dice are great. You can buy some of the Kriegspiel bits and pieces through Command Post Games as well in America, but they also do the Kriegspiel dice, which I'm looking at the moment. But these are great because, in effect, when you work out firing combat scenarios, rather than having to do bucket of dice, not that this was ever a bucket of dice system, you will roll one dice, and basically depending on what you roll, and you'll see these have got some very interesting kind of numbers across them, different symbols, and the little book you get kind of explains what they all mean and what they do. So yeah, I think PubBattles dice is a great idea. As I say, everything's in there. Talks you through what you need to do. So yeah, a nice thing there. In terms of movement on the map, how does that work? Well, you've got various things you can do. You can move using the chains, which, to be honest with you, for certain movements are definitely the way to go. So if you're moving blocks and you're moving in awkward terrain, so you take, for example, these guys here, the artillery reserve with Dicules units, they're on top of a hill here. You may want to move them specifically around a terrain area. So the smaller one is foot movement. You would put the chain down, let's say they're going up this road here, and you could literally sort of work out their movements using the chain to where they wanted to go. So let's say they wanted to go over here, not that they do, but if they did, you could then move them across like so. So the chains are really good. The larger ones are for cavalry, but you also have movement sticks. So you've got your foot ones again, exactly the same as the chain in terms of length, and then the mounted ones again there. So again, depending on what you want to use at a given point, you've got lots of flexibility there in terms of how you can do that. So again, really nice components to speed the game up and make it really easy from that point of view. So as I said earlier, I'm just waiting for my upgrade pack. The rules themselves cover probably about 6 pages, and you get a PDF upgrade from time to time which you can download off the site just with any new additional rules. Very nicely laid out, simplistic examples, colour. Yeah, nice simple rules, give a fast flowing game, and lots of historical, I feel lots of historical flavour. For some, the game may be too simplistic, particularly when you're dealing with such beautiful maps. And you know, I've seen some feedback around the size of the blocks to the terrain. Personally, I don't think it's an issue. You've got to remember that these blocks represent large numbers of troops, and it actually does say in the rules themselves, you know, that these blocks can represent a significant number of men. I mean, infantry, for example, could represent 1,500 to 7,000 men in a block. So, you know, we're talking large numbers here. Kriegspiel blocks, for example, the little Kriegspiel blocks are about 450 men to a block, and you would have normally maybe 2 to 4 of those. So again, depends what you're using and how you feel about that. For me, it's not an issue. Some of the new rules that have just come into play are things like baggage trains and detachments. Baggage trains are improving or bringing into play rallying, using your baggage. You know, you decide where to unpack it on the battlefield. Once it's unpacked, it can't be packed up without the battle ending. You can't afford to have the enemy overrun your baggage. That makes bad things happen. But by having your baggage in the right place at the right time, that can rally your troops as well. So there are, again, fine differences there. Detachments really are kind of additional skirmishers or open order troops. The great thing about those is that you can't see necessarily whether they are a proper unit, or because troops will always be deployed this way up with the name ticket towards you. Your enemy player or friendly player can't see what unit that is. So it could be a detachment, it could be a division, it could be a corps, etc, etc. So yes, I've got everything up here face up, purely for the purposes of the video, to just show you the aesthetics of the system. But normally you wouldn't see it like this, so to speak. So yeah, some really interesting things in there. I'm just going to show you some of the original scenario information. So you get a map with some deployment information on there, where reserves come on, your deployment areas, which I think is really nice. You get a list of all your units and their commands. Just zoom that in a bit. Obviously, again, this changes slightly with some of the upgrades, but principally it's the same units. And then there may be some special rules specifically for the scenario. So in this one, things like the sunken road are mentioned on there. Victory conditions, optional second day, night turns. It all comes into play with a bit of a historical overlay as well. You know, really simple, but again, simple but with depth, which I think makes the game really attractive system. Activations pretty much done by a chip pull system. So you get a number of these bags, and each command has a token in it. So let's show you here. So for example, this is AR, which is Union Artillery Reserve, and if we zoom the camera in so you can see a bit closer, you'll see that there are units there called Artillery Reserve. Okay, so if you pull that chit out, you would then be able to move all of those particular blocks that come under that command from that point of view. Okay, and you basically will go through pulling out the chits for each command until everybody has had their activations. At that point you will then deal with predominantly melee and firing, and that's all done at the same time simultaneously. So movement is really important, and the order that things are moved is really important, because that will determine how you gain initiative in the battle going forward. So I've just reset the camera a little bit with some light. Hopefully we won't get too much shadow coming through. Again, a lovely mechanic within the game around the chip pull system. So let's say we're pulling out some chits here, and let's pull one out. Okay, so we've pulled out this particular core here, 11th. Okay, I think it's 11th. So we would look along here, and we can see these guys are positioned over the back here on the table. Again, apologies for the shadow there. So let's say that one of the Confederate commands wanted to interrupt and move before they did. They could make an interrupt roll to see whether they could take the initiative pre that movement. So as long as they had an HQ within range of the unit, Union and Confederate will have different ratings depending on the battle in terms of what they have to roll. It's normally just purely one dice roll to see whether they can alter the order, and you have to roll less than or equal to your HQ rating. So in this case, the Confederate rating is 4 for this battle. They would have to roll a 4 or less on a d6, and then they could move first. So let's say this was Longstreet, who's here, and he wants to interrupt and grab the initiative with his units under his command. He rolls a 3. What he would do there is just turn himself over, and you can see then that he's done his one interrupt for this total turn, and he would move all his units. Now it could be before he does move that another unit wants to interrupt, so another Union player could also say, no, I want to interrupt before Longstreet moves, and this can go on until both players agree who has the initiative. And what it means is in his subsequent movements now that Longstreet cannot interrupt anymore, because he's already tried, or he's either failed or succeeded in a previous part of the turn, and each command gets one chance to do that. So that's a nice mechanic, that it flows the battle back and forth, it keeps both players involved, and importantly it does allow players to grab the initiative at key focal points on the battlefield. Okay, let's just talk a little bit about some of the units. So these chaps are, as you would expect, cavalry. So this is Hampton. Hope you can see that okay. It wants to zoom in. It doesn't want to at the moment for some reason. I don't know why. But it is Hampton. It's probably because of the map behind it. But Hampton is cavalry, and you've got the equivalent Union cavalry over here. Okay, you've got then just standard kind of infantry units. In this case, this is Walker. Again, hopefully you can just about see that. It's probably the light, I do apologise. And then you've got, as we've shown, the command blocks. Now, the infantry can be standard infantry, or they may have this little emblem on the side like the cavalry did. That just means they're elite units or slightly better quality units, which means they can soak up a bit more damage. Or you may have units with, in this case, a G, which means they're militia or green troops, and they're more susceptible to run. They can't take too much effect on their morale before they'll retreat. But again, used effectively, they can still work for your side with no problems. So principally, elite units can suck up the first hit they get without any major effect, and green units get double the impact of any hits, and obviously then you've got your normal units wedged in between. So again, really simple, but you have to think about where you're positioning the different qualities of your different units, and using cover where needed to maximize the impact of those as well. Terrain plays its part. Obviously there's a lot of terrain on these maps, and as you can see in this case, you know, it's a beautiful map. Just going to zoom it in a little bit there. You know, the details on this map are something to behold. They are spectacular. I would say they are the best maps I have wargamed on outside of Kriegspiel itself. And I am a bit of a map nut from that point of view, but you can see the kind of quality of the detail in those maps, the fields, the woods, roads, orchards. You know, you got the contours of the land. There's the Potomac there, by the way. You know, really nice details on the map. So how does that impact on the game? Well, it does to a point, and that's one of the things I like, really. Terrain, you know, it's not a game changer, but you can use certain bits of terrain to certainly benefit your armies. You can also use road column moves. So if you're on roads, you can move ×2 your normal movement in march column. So again, like historically, you can move troops around the battlefield that bit quicker, but of course they are vulnerable if attacked, and not as effective from that point of view. So again, each time the rules are upgraded, you get a terrain chart, terrain effects chart, nicely produced, and you can see there's effects to movement and effects to combat, but nothing complicated. It's normally a modifier up or down, or a reduction in movement, which would be a reduction, you know, one of these three parts of the movement for foot or mounted. So again, nice and simple. Pretty much buildings, woods, hills, streams, rivers are the main things that would impact on movement. Anything else is really cosmetic and just adds flavour to the game. You know, you're fighting over a beautiful map. That in itself is engrossing. You get reinforcements anyway, reserves that will come on at different points, and there will normally be reinforcement points on the field. So on this particular map, I'm just going to zoom in here, you'll see these little pointers, little marks here and here, and then there's another one over the other side here as well, and they could be areas that you need to march off from a victory point perspective, or they could be where reserve troops could be arriving on the field at crucial points. And of course you can also bring on reserves through your officers using your blinds, so you might have units that are out of view of the enemy, and the units will be able to deploy at these kind of forward points where your HQs or commands are as well. So again, a nice mechanic there as well. Okay, so I just wanted to finally give you just an overview of how a combat situation would work. Let's just get the camera working a little bit better there. So what I've done to try and simplify here is put the blocks how they would be during the game. In other words, in this case the Confederate player is defending the sunken road with D. Jones's units here, and the Union have crossed over Antietam Creek, and they basically, over the bridge of course, which is Middle Bridge, and they're basically launching an attack straight over against this unit. So really simple. Let's show you how that works. So resolving combat, in this case you will try and align units as best as possible. So this is a very basic example of how that would work, and I'm going to use normal dice just again to show you how this would work in reality, rather than confuse you at this stage with the PubBattles dice for the purposes of the video. So you would basically work out how many dice you both roll, and you will keep fighting until you get an outcome. So this isn't one of these scenarios where you have one round of melee, then you pull away and then you start again. You will fight until one unit either retreats or is destroyed, and that's normally forced upon you. You can voluntarily retreat, of course, and sometimes there is a strong protocol for doing that, but let's just show you how that works. So step one is the lead piece for the defender and the attacker in contact fire, and apply hits accordingly. So infantry will roll 3 dice each and simply need a 4, 5 or 6 on a d6. They would then have modifiers. So modifiers would be attackers firing at a defender in cover would suffer a -1. So in this case this unit is firing at this unit in the sunken road, therefore that provides cover. So the Union player, although he's rolling 3 dice, he will be at a -1, and the Confederate player will be rolling 3 dice but with no modifiers there. Defender is not on a hill, the defender is not in woods, and there's no fire in the flanks. So other than that, they're the only modifiers. So really simple. So let's roll the Union player first, and we've got a 1, 4 and a 5. At -1, that is 1 hit, because that becomes a 3. Oops. And that becomes a 4. So 1 hit. And for the Confederate player, we have 1 hit as well with a 5. So it'd be a hit apiece from that point of view. And really it's as simple as that, as far as that's concerned. So 1 hit, for a fresh unit they become spent, and in this case what you would do is turn the blocks up. At this point you both can see what you've both got there. So in this case the Confederates have got D. Jones regular troops, and the Union or Federals have got Scammon, who are green stroke militia class troops. So they're now both spent. Okay, so the key thing to remember here is fire and combat are one and the same thing as far as this scenario are concerned. So both units have taken 1 hit each, but you'll remember me talking about green troops. Green troops count their first hit in combat as 2 hits. So in that case they become spent and they would retreat. And they would retreat 1/3 of a move, ignoring terrain. So for foot, 1/3, you could say, well actually there, if I lift the camera up there, in this case they would be back across the river, or behind Antietam Creek, and so they would be sitting there, and that would be the end of that, and that literally would be the end of that particular combat. So really simple system, but you can see how quickly things can be resolved and sorted out. Now, defending cavalry could retreat before combat if contacted by infantry, so obviously they can use their speed to get out of the way, which I think is really good. So cavalry are really effective for reconnaissance and scouting in this game, as historically in the American Civil War particularly, you know, mounted troops, to all intents and purposes, were mounted infantry, and they were used very much for scouting, reconnaissance. They weren't like your line cavalry of the Napoleonic Wars, and if you try and use them like that with firepower the way it was, they are going to come off very badly indeed. Again, just to explain, firing on its own right can be done at 1/3 of foot move range. So in this case, these two units, if they did nothing else next turn, could actually be firing at one another without generally getting into combat. So if it was firing, in effect you would fire once and that would be it, whereas in combat, of course, you may continue round after round until one side sort of breaks or pulls back. So that's the fundamental difference between fire and combat. The mechanics are exactly the same, but you've got some distance and the fact you're reduced to the number of effects in effect. That firing is once and one off. Combat just continues until there's an outcome. So I just wanted to talk about artillery as well. Artillery plays an important part in this period anyway, as it did in the Napoleonic Wars and all the sort of 17, 18, 1900s. But it's not, in my view, it's not weighted too heavily. So you can use it effectively, it's very helpful, but it's not going to dominate these battles. These battles are going to be won by the infantry. Artillery can effectively do two things. It can break up an attack in defence, and it can bombard from a distance and prepare an attack, so to speak. So if it's attacked, it defends in the first round only. So again, let's take the example here. In this example, although it would normally be simultaneous, artillery defending would fire first, and it may be able to then fight off that attack before any further combat or attacks on it happen. If it doesn't, it will be attacked back, and any hit pretty much will knock that artillery out of action. So that's it in a combat scenario. In terms of bombardment, it can fire at range. It fires at a range of 1 full foot movement, so you know it's got quite a long range from that point of view. You know, that covers a significant part of the battlefield. If I just show you that there, it can cover quite a long area with that fire arc of 45 degrees as it has as well. So importantly though, bombardments, and this I like, they do not destroy units. Whoops. They literally will force units to retreat from their positions, so to seek cover elsewhere. And I think that's a nice rule. So they're effective at dislodging units, putting them into vulnerable positions, but what they don't do is destroy them outright. That's for the infantry or the horse to do. So I like that. I think that's a really good rule. There are lots of other mechanics built into the game. I'm not going to cover them all on here. So I hope that's giving you a good flavour of Command Post Games PubBattles. This is the Antietam scenario. As I said, I didn't want to go into an in-depth play session at this stage, but what I wanted to do was show you some of the components, talk through some of the mechanics that I particularly like, and what I may do at a future video is get into the detail of a game, particularly when we're out of the pandemic and we're able to get other players into play. And it might be easier for me to record that and show you that working in its entirety with the blind system as well. But I hope you've enjoyed the video, and it's giving you a little insight into a very different way of playing a war game. It's not a board game, it's not a figure game, it is PubBattles by Command Post Games. Hope you've enjoyed the video and look forward to seeing you again soon.